Step back or she dies. Take the gun off her head. Or what? You really don't want the answer to that. The Coalition Medical Exchange Station on Dravath 4 was, by design, one of the most politically neutral locations in the outer systems. It occupied a converted orbital platform above a low-population world in the contested buffer zone between Coalition space and Croth territory, a deliberate placement that made it equidistant between both jurisdictions and therefore technically under neither. The station hosted a rotating staff of Coalition medical personnel, providing care to populations in the buffer zone regardless of species or political affiliation. It was the kind of facility that both sides of a border dispute found useful enough to leave alone. It had been operational for 6 years without a significant incident. The significant incident arrived without advance notice on a morning when the station was running a reduced crew rotation. A Croth patrol vessel, not a military designation, which would have triggered the station's alert protocols, but registered as civilian transport, docked at the secondary bay and discharged 11 occupants who were, under their civilian transit documentation, simply passengers. They were not simply passengers. The 11 were Croth Enforcement Division operatives, the species' internal security force, which operated under different rules of engagement than the military and which had, over the past year, been expanding its operational reach into the buffer zone in ways that the Coalition had been filing formal objections about for 11 months. The Enforcement Division's current project was the extraction of a Croth political dissident who had, according to their documentation, illegally entered Coalition-adjacent space. The dissident was a patient in the station's Ward 7. He had arrived 3 weeks ago with injuries consistent with what the medical staff had documented carefully as blunt force trauma of undetermined origin and had been receiving treatment under the station's standard non-deportation medical protocol. The Enforcement Division wanted him back. What they found when they reached Ward 7 was Nurse Bryn Calloway, who was in the middle of a medication check and who turned around when the 11 Croth operatives entered the ward and said, with the tone of a woman who had been working in contested space medicine for 4 years and had developed a specific threshold for disruption, "This is a restricted medical ward. You need authorization to be here." The Croth commander, a broad-shouldered operative named Davithkra, who had spent 12 years in the Enforcement Division and had never had a human medical professional respond to his entry with the word authorization, decided that the quickest path through the conversation was demonstration. He raised his weapon and pressed it against Bryn's temple. 30 feet down the corridor, framed in the ward's entrance, stood Chief Petty Officer Marcus Holt. Marcus was 36 years old. He was the station security liaison, a position that had been created specifically because Coalition medical exchange facilities in buffer zones required someone with both medical clearance and security capability, and Marcus had both. He had spent 12 years as a United States Navy SEAL before transitioning to Coalition service, and he was currently carrying a standard-issue Coalition security sidearm and wearing the station's gray liaison uniform. He looked like a logistics officer. He was not a logistics officer. The Croth commander had made his assessment of Marcus Holt in approximately 3 seconds upon entering the ward. Taller than average, built but not massive, and holding a weapon that was considerably less impressive than the armament the Enforcement Division carried. The assessment had concluded, manageable. The assessment was wrong in 11 specific ways that Marcus could have listed, but was not going to spend time on. "Take the gun off her head," Marcus said. The commander's response was the one that people give when they believe they have established control of a situation. A statement of terms, a demand for compliance, a weapon pressed harder to emphasize the point. Marcus had already stopped listening after or what? The 12 years of SEAL training did not present themselves as dramatic in the way that action becomes dramatic in narrative reconstructions. What happened in the next 19 seconds was documented afterward by the station security recording system, and the Coalition security analysis team that reviewed the footage spent 3 hours on it before filing a report that described the sequence as textbook close-quarters threat neutralization executed at a tempo inconsistent with standard Coalition security protocols. What the report meant was that Marcus moved faster than the Croth Enforcement Division had a framework for. The first 4 operatives between Marcus and Bryn were neutralized before the commander had completed processing the fact that Marcus was no longer standing in the entrance. The commander's weapon was removed from Bryn's temple, not by request or negotiation, but by the specific applied physics of a risk control technique that Marcus had practiced 10,000 times on a base in Virginia and had applied in field conditions on 3 continents before he had ever heard of the Coalition. The commander found himself on the floor of Ward 7 with his weapon in Marcus' hand and the specific understanding of a person who had made an assessment and discovered it was wrong in ways they did not yet have the vocabulary to describe. The remaining operatives stopped moving. Bryn, who had not moved during the 19 seconds, looked at the 11 operatives in various states of incapacitation around her ward, and then at Marcus, who was standing between her and the commander with the calm expression of someone who had completed a task and was now available for the next one. "You were fast," she said. "Standard response time," Marcus said. "For what?" "For this," he said, with the specific tone of someone for whom this was genuinely a category of situation with a standard response time. The station's alert system had triggered at second 3. Backup arrived at the 4-minute mark. Coalition security personnel entered Ward 7 and found 11 Enforcement Division operatives secured, one nurse continuing her medication check, and one security liaison completing his incident documentation. The Coalition filed a formal protest with Croth authorities within the hour. The Croth Enforcement Division filed its own internal report, which was later obtained through Coalition intelligence channels and which described the station security liaison as presenting a significantly non-standard threat profile. The Croth Enforcement Division's specific language for something they had encountered that did not fit their existing categories. They did not attempt another extraction from the exchange station. Bryn found Marcus in the station's small common room that evening, completing the last section of his incident report. She sat down across from him with 2 cups of whatever the station synthesizer produced that was closest to coffee and put one in front of him. 12 years, she asked. He looked up. "Your file," she said. I looked. Standard Coalition liaison certifications don't produce 19-second response times. A pause that carried the specific quality of someone who worked in contested space medicine and had learned to read the information that wasn't in official documentation. 12 years somewhere specific. Virginia, he said, and other places. Navy. Yes. She looked at the cup in front of him and then at his expression, which was the same calm it had been in the ward, the specific quality of someone for whom the dramatic thing that had just happened was a professional event, not an emotional one, and who was now present in a room drinking coffee and being asked about his file. "Are you all right?" she asked with the tone she used with patients who were managing something they were not advertising. Marcus looked at her. In 12 years of SEAL service and 3 years of coalition posting, no one had asked him that question after an incident. The question was always about the operational outcome, the documentation, the protocol compliance. "Yes," he said then, with the same honesty that she had applied to her question. "Thank you for asking." Bryn wrapped both hands around her cup. "The patient in Ward 7, she said. "He's going to be fine medically." A pause. "Whatever he's going back to, that's a different question. The station's non-deportation protocol holds until he's medically cleared," Marcus said. "I checked." "I know." She looked at him. "I meant after." Marcus considered this. "I'll make sure the transfer documentation includes a full coalition medical witness record," he said. "Every injury, every treatment, every observation, dated and signed. Anything that happens to him after goes on record as happening after." Bryn was quiet for a moment. "That's not nothing," she said. "No," he said. "It's not." They sat in the station's common room while the buffer zone turned slowly outside the viewport, and the documentation was finished, and the coffee was whatever it was, and neither of them said anything else for a while, which was, Marcus thought, the most comfortable silence he had found in 3 years of coalition posting.